Alright, so the date is Sunday, November 27th, 2016, and we are in my home in Strasburg, Colorado, and I'm here with my grandma, Diana Wallace, and we're going to be talking about her experiences and thoughts of the Vietnam War and the era. So,
All right. Like I said, my name's Diana, and I graduated from high school in 1969, so the Vietnam War was definitely going on during that time. That was when all the guys that would graduate from high school would end up getting drafted, a lot of them, to go to the war. They didn't necessarily want to go, but they had to go. Um, I wasn't totally into what was going on with the war. I wasn't really paying attention to the politics and things. I just know it was going on. Um, but when I went to college, I went to high school in Denver, Colorado. That's where I was born. Lakewood actually. And so when I went to college at Colorado State University, of course that was the era of the hippies, war protesters. They were up at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, Colorado, but our neighboring school, Boulder, Colorado University, had quite a few more. A more liberal school had quite a few more hippies. I saw them. Didn't have a lot of interaction with them, except that I had roommates who were hippies, especially one. I was At that time I didn't know anything about drugs. My roommate was growing marijuana in the window as plants, and I didn't know it. So I didn't know a lot going on, but what my experience was meeting people that had been to Vietnam at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital in Aurora, Colorado. I was in a group that would go out and just socialize with the guys who came back, and that was my experience, was all the horrific injuries that these young men suffered, and um, just trying to be a positive thing in their life as they were out there. Oh, we'd go on picnics and things, just to get them out of the hospital. And so my experience was more meeting people that had been there, and a lot of the guys, they just wouldn't talk about it. I became friends with a guy who'd stepped on a landmine he was from California, and I damaged him pretty extensively. And of course, there were the injuries where there was no really, what kind of life would these young men have? How could you live without arms or legs or without a face? Or I know there was a lot of protesting against the soldiers, the military, when they came back, and my friends were not involved in calling them baby killers or blaming them for the war, but I know that was going on. There's a lot of drugs around me at that time. They were real prevalent. I didn't use any drugs, but it was all around me. Um, and of course, all the music that was in Vietnam and the drugs in Vietnam, just the whole thing was so terrible. All the Agent Orange that they were using that would later kill so many of our men back here in the States. Um, I don't know. It just, that was my experience, was just seeing kind of some of the aftermath. Nobody in my family had been there.
right.
So I was fortunate in that aspect, but I could see it.
Alright, so I'm just going to get into a couple of these questions, and you've already talked about some of it. Maybe you could just elaborate on them more. So, what were you doing prior to the war starting, or prior to your awareness of the war?
I was a student, living my life into myself. um, was a big Beatles fan, all that new music, really. At that time, I just didn't even know anything about politics. Before it started, I was pretty young. Because when did it start, Johnny? Dad?
Um,
Let's see, Dad must have been
Unofficially, it was,
21.
yeah, 68, 67, I believe.
Yeah, so I was just in high school. I was just out of middle school going into high school. We didn't, well, at my home, I was an only child. We didn't talk about it. We didn't watch it on TV, anything about it. So I didn't know a whole lot about it. I didn't know anything about it really till the guys were being drafted until I went out to the Army hospital. So I had a pretty sheltered life, which is probably what a lot of kids my age, probably in Denver, Colorado, didn't know a whole lot about it, I would imagine.
Right. So I guess with that being said, how did you learn about or receive information about the war, and how did that change your perspective on the war? Like, what are your modes of, I guess, learning about what was going on?
Well, when they started drafting my classmates after they graduated from high school,
Okay.
People being aware, like seeing it on TV finally about protesters in New York, things like that. The music that came out was, a lot of it was anti-war, or like Peter, Paul, and Mary singing anti-war songs, peace songs. I liked a lot of that music. That made me aware. A lot of the music made me aware about what was going on. People, just singing songs about young men dying and why is there wars. And again, I lived in Denver, which wasn't a real radical city, so I didn't see a lot of it. I did go to Boulder once, coming home from college in Fort Collins. Boulder was south of us, and saw a lot of hippies there and a lot of people acting completely crazy on drugs. One guy even jumped on our car and was beating on our windows, obviously high, long black cape, stovepipe hat, just crazy looking, beating on our car because they were all in the streets. Everybody's in the streets, living on the streets. So they got more aware then. And then as I got older in the music, I got more aware of what the music was saying. I became aware. And I didn't understand what was going on with the war. I didn't know why we were there. I just felt like it was not a good thing. I wasn't protesting it, but I didn't feel like it was a good thing.
Right.
Because look what it was doing to our people.
Right.
And I felt like protesters, it's one thing to protest, it's another thing to become violent and crazy and hurt other people while you're protesting. And even then I thought there's people here that aren't really here for the war. They're here for their own purpose, just to create mayhem. Because most of the people I knew weren't violent. So where were these really violent, crazy protesters coming from?
Right. So I guess, yeah, you kind of already answered this one. What was your understanding of why the U.S. was involved in Vietnam?
Well, our country's always been in some kind of war or the other, and it's just another war. I didn't understand it. I didn't have a lot of political science background. I just really didn't know what we were doing over there. I knew it was an unpopular war. I didn't know why. So I didn't know a lot about it. Just really didn't know the background of it. I still don't understand exactly why we were there, except keeping the communists from making headway. Of course, everybody knew who the communists were.
Right. And yeah, that's it.
And making, we didn't want the communists, but as I've gotten older, there's a lot more to it than where the decisions where to have war, what kind of war, how it's going to be fought. Those, as I've gotten older, I've understood more. I never understood why our guys were drafted against their will. There were guys who enlisted, of course. But then they went over, they come back, they go through that horrific, horrific situation over there. They come back, and then they're accused of being baby killers, and people are against them. I wasn't against them. I saw people as people, and I thought they'd been through a really bad thing. I didn't know why people were in the country were being agitated up to be against these young men who'd gone to fight. Just like every war we've ever had. Why were we choosing to condemn these guys? instead of be proud of them. And I'm really thankful that since then we've learned, but a lot of people were injured and mentally from all of that and have never gotten over it. We've learned as a country, I think, not to treat people who've been in war that badly like that.
All right, so could you tell me about your experiences during the Vietnam War? Like, what were you doing? So before you were a student and during, it seemed like you were a student as well, and I don't know.
My experiences I was just a student.
You were just a student.
Going to school, getting more and more information on it, but I wasn't seeking out information. You know, I wasn't a political science major. I wasn't active in any groups. My family didn't talk about it, so I was kind of just on the fringe, except for going out to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital and being involved there. I was just on the fringes of it. I really didn't have a lot to do with it. Listening to the music, I was more into the Beatles, and probably just more into my life and what I was doing. Again, I didn't have anybody involved in it, so it didn't bring it home to me like a lot of people, because I didn't have a brother or a boyfriend or anybody who was there. My big experience was when I married my husband, who had missed out, thank goodness, on the war. By then I realized how fortunate he was to have just barely missed it.
All right,
I was a student. Naive student. Sheltered.
Yeah.
I was really sheltered.
Can you tell me about a specific experience from the Vietnam War era that you can't forget, or your most vivid memory of the time period?
That would be going out to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital and walking into that room where all the guys were in their beds or sitting up that had been so injured.
Right.
And were in rehabilitation. And some of them would never survive. Even the friend I made out there, he was having problems that maybe down the road he probably wouldn't have lived. Been stepped on a landmine. And so he was able to get around. He'd lost a leg and was never able to have children. But I think there were more extensive injuries I didn't even know about internally.
Right.
That might have killed him later on in life. So that was my experiences, just seeing firsthand.
And interacting with those.
Interacting, and they didn't talk about it.
Right.
They had each other. They didn't talk about strange people that came in too much.
Right.
I got to know him more than maybe you would a lot of people for a while. We were, close friends, but he went to California and I stayed here.
All right, so it seemed like you had a pretty unique experience, like interacting with soldiers and stuff when they came home. So, how were they treated? And I guess I'm asking this in a really formal way, like at the hospital. Like, how are they treated? And then again, in more casual setting around other citizens and things like that. Just when they came back.
The obviously injured men, I think, were given respect. Like he'd lost a leg. At the hospital, they were treated like a regular patient. They were kindly treated. I personally have never been in a situation where I saw anybody from Vietnam treated badly. I just heard about it, saw it on TV. I personally have never seen anybody spit on or demeaned. That could have been more exaggerated by the media than it really was. Because, I was never in a riot or a demonstration or anything, I never had was around anybody like that who would treat them badly. My family respected our soldiers, our military, but I never was. My parents respected Dale, that was his name. They respected him, they liked him. I never personally saw any of it, but you heard of it. So how, again, was it because I lived in Denver, or was it, why? I didn't live on the coast where things were really going on.
Right.
So it might have been exaggerated. I don't know. From their point of view, we never. I don't know how they were treated.
All right. So will you describe the atmosphere of what people were feeling during the war?
I think real sadness of the fighting, fear, a fear that their own family members would have to go, of course, fear that their sons would be drafted. Um, I had a friend in college that was in the Army, ROTC, and was already an airborne ranger who I think wanted to go and do whatever he had to do because he was certainly training for it. So I didn't, again, I think there's maybe a subculture within our culture, many subcultures, of course. But there was that subculture of the military that was to themselves. So whatever they might have been thinking or whatever was happening to them, I wasn't aware of it because I wasn't in that culture. It was that military culture. The guys, their families, their girlfriends, I wasn't in that. So
Right.
I don't know. It just seemed like, oh, there's something you got to do. Or when I was at the hospital, well, they might have been on, and most likely been on some pretty strong painkillers. So they weren't, I never heard any of them getting agitated or upset, but like I said, I would think they were on some pretty strong medication.
Right.
To help them keep calm about the whole thing. I would have been darn mad if it was me.
Right.
But you go into the military and what happens to you happens. There were also protesters that were, people I knew, I didn't know them personally, but that they would draft dodgers.
Right.
And I wasn't against them either. I never really felt passionately against any of our military. I just thought they were in a really bad situation. Just terrible.
Well, building off that, if you could explain the war in one word, what would it be? So it's kind of a hard question.
One word would be devastating. More than one word would be, I don't think the American people knew what was going on. Really. Not the general American people.
Right.
Had. And what could we do? Maybe helpless? Maybe my word would be one word?
One word's difficult, I know.
Helplessness? Or devastating?
Yeah. So could you elaborate on why you chose those words?
Nothing I personally could do about it. I did what I could. I went out and tried to get to know some people and take them out on picnics and things and get them out of the hospital. Go on some outings. Get them out, be friendly. Encouraging is, it was devastating because there was nothing I personally could do about it.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of people probably felt that way as well.
Yeah. And we were at the mercy of politics.
Yeah.
Devastating, I guess, would be my main word. Devastated.
Alright. Once war was over, did life return to normal, or were some things permanently changed?
For me personally, life returned to normal because of the field I chose to work in. I didn't see a lot of it. I chose to work in early childhood education. It didn't affect me a lot. And where I lived, I didn't see a lot of either the injured men or somewhere else, or they weren't out on the street a lot. You do see people on the street with injuries in my age, around my age, And you think probably they'd been in the war. A lot of guys were injured mentally. They might not have looked injured. I think that might. At that time, life just kept on, but for now, at my age, and seeing all the way some people are acting out and fighting back against being treated badly, or just against what has happened in their personal life. I mean, you see it more. I don't know if these people that go in and shoot up the post office or whatever, I don't know if they're Vietnam veterans that were injured mentally, and they just can't take the stress anymore of working with people that are hateful.
Right.
I'm surprised it doesn't happen more. Actually, sometimes um, I don't think our veterans are getting the help they need. But I personally am not involved. It doesn't affect my life personally because nobody in my family. My husband didn't, to my knowledge, have any experiences that were devastating to him personally because the war hadn't started when he got out of the Marines. It hadn't even started yet.
Right.
And he's not big on reminiscing on anything, so.
All right. Well, have your views on the war and the whole era changed over time? Like as you've gotten older and had time to reflect on it?
I personally think that drugs became a big part of society surrounding me more than maybe my parents' generation. They never talked about anything. They never talked about anything regarding anything like that, so I have no idea what their lives or their experiences were like. My dad was in the Army, Air Force aspect of the Army, but his flat feet kept him from going overseas. Had he gone, his group he was with, they were all killed. That's the most I know. He's never talked about his experience, but that wasn't Vietnam. We never talked about it in our family. But I think that the constant social upheaval got worse at that time by people going in and just maybe deliberately trying to make things worse than they already were. I just think that there were people that deliberately took advantage of the situation for their own agendas, and it might not have had anything to do with the war. Does that make sense? I mean, that's the only thing I can see is that, generally speaking, there seems to be a lot more agitation in society.
Right.
And a lot more social problems.
Right.
But I probably just wasn't aware of them because I was a kid.
Yeah. And you were definitely at a time in your life where you were doing a lot of growing intellectually and personally.
And of course I went into education and then special education, and so many families have so many problems related to drugs, related to abusive parents that could be related to maybe their parents who'd been in the war and had gotten traumatized and hurt their kids. I think it all goes together, all these problems. I think war really makes it so much worse. Everybody just gets some effect from it in a bad way.
So what do you think we could have done differently as a nation and individuals? And
Well, I personally didn't know anything that was going on politically, but I think we were too fast. Maybe we in the past have been too fast to jump into these. I don't know. It's just like the wars we've had since then, and we've always had. We don't give the men and women fighting what they really need to fight. for starters. I don't think they're allowed to do their job. I don't think the Vietnam War, maybe we just jumped into it without really being as prepared as we should have been. Maybe we were too willing to sacrifice our soldiers, our military, just too willing to put them into situations where they would get killed. Too willing to overlook the problems they were having over there. Too willing to just keep forcing them to do into situations where they weren't backed up. That's my take. They didn't have the support, maybe, that they needed to get the job done. They drug on and on and on and on and on and on for political reasons, no doubt. They're all political. But I don't think they had enough backup and support. And they were treated terribly. What could we have done to change it, you say? Or what could we do now?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it was more what could we have done differently, but yeah, if you may have some ideas on what we could do now to change
Well,
it.
we have done better on supporting our military. People go up and thank people now. I do it. You know, when people, I'd say the majority of American citizens, when they know what's going on, they react in a positive way to be supportive and helpful. But I think our hands are still tied as terms of what the politicians are doing, of what's. I think we still don't let the military do their job, and I think that causes things to go on and on and on and cause a lot of damage. What can we do differently? Well, I think we need to be. Me personally, what do I think? I think we're constantly raising our children to be ready to go and give their lives and fight with all the video games that are out there, all the violence in the movies. We're just training our kids to think of that as an okay thing to do. And that's our entertainment, is violence and fighting and for whatever reason, the powers that be in our country and all over the world, who's ever in control of things, is brainwashing our kids, just like they brainwash the kids in the really poor areas by actually taking them out and making them child soldiers. We're taking our children and making them essentially child fighters by video games. It all boils down to greed and money, and I wish we would embrace peace. In that regard, as far as the hippies wanting peace, that was good. The hippies wanting peace, and let's not fight, no war anymore. But there was another element in there that turned that on its head, and to make money with the drugs and everything else.
All right,
I don't think we care enough about people as individuals. I think our government sees people as just pieces in a game to go over and fight and get killed, and oh well.
Yeah, kind of another resource.
Another resource, another collateral damage.
Right.
And
all right, well, I think to wrap this up, I've got one more question. So, what lessons did you learn, and what would you want others to remember about this time in history?
I learned that we don't want war. I learned that that's why I went into Montessori education. One big reason was because it promotes peace education. Let's learn to get along with each other. Let's learn to cooperate with each other. Let's learn to put aside. We are all human beings. We all are on this earth together. We're all trying. We need to help each other. We need to cooperate with each other. That's what Montessori is. That's one of the main reasons I went into it, peace education. I'm proud of my whole family, of my son and my daughters and my grandkids, that they are peaceful. That they have never been violent. They have never wanted to go into those kinds of. I'm not against soldiers who are here to help us, to protect us. I'm not against the military. I'm just saying I think changing our attitude into how can we stop this fighting? How can we make peace with people? How can we work together? How can we help each other? That's what I learned. And it probably started right then. Because I didn't have any idea before about that. But when I discovered Montessori education, and that was education for peace, Maria Montessori wanted the whole world to be peaceful. She was against all this war too. But it starts with the little kids. You teach them to get along with each other. You teach them that, but then they grow up, and other countries are wanting to fight with us, and then what? It's very, very hard. I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know how we're going to. Refusing to fight? I don't know. Refusing to kill each other. Refusing to. I don't know how we can do it. That was my personal thing. Peace. Educate for peace.
Well, I think that's great. If there's anything else you want to talk about or say, or...
Well, there's just so many angry people all around. I think people get brainwashed really easily. I think they're easily led, and I don't know why. They're easily led like sheep to hate other people. They're easily led into destructive behavior for themselves. Easily led into, why do we have such a problem with drugs and alcohol and everything else? Why do we have all these people are just easily led? I don't know. I think we've always been. It's human nature, and I'm not sure why. Easily led into hating other people. People want to bring religion into it. There's certain things of religion to help the whole world, but people don't want it. I'm not just saying Christian. I'm saying, I think a lot of religions are peace and not war, but I don't know. I don't know for sure because I never studied them intently. But we just don't want it. We want to fight. We want our way.
Right.
Why? But I really believe Montessori helps it. I really do. I really believe if you learn how to have self-esteem and know that, get your confidence at a real young age so that later on you have a better understanding of yourself, maybe you're not so easily led. I don't know. That's what I think.
All right. That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Johnny.